That'd be convenient.
Yeah, that would be.
Okay, here we're going. All right. Hey, welcome back to this week's show. Joining me today, I've got my friend Charlie Cook. He is the host of Riding Shotgun with Charlie. He does something called Gungrams, that we're going to talk about a little bit. But he is also behind enemy lines in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, also known as the People's Republic of Massachusetts. And we're going to talk about a very particular gun law that's being considered there that is, oh my God, freaking ridiculous. So, Charlie, thanks for joining me, brother.
Tom, thanks for having me on, man. I was excited when you asked me to hop on with you. This is great. Thank you.
Absolutely, and we don't have to be in your car.
We, this is good too.
Yeah, this is a little easier to work out, you know.
It
Uh,
really is.
yeah.
S-
So, all right, let's talk a little bit about HD 4420. That's the bill that has been we I've written about it a little bit. I know you've been very involved in combating this. For the folks who are unfamiliar, what is 4420?
it started with this thing that the one of the state representatives from Massachusetts did. His name was Michael Day. He was given the job of looking at the gun laws and revamping the gun laws top to bottom from the Speaker of the House, Ron Mariano. So he did this thing that he called the Gun Law Listening Tour, and they picked 11 different places around Massachusetts to go to, and they would find it at a community school, a community college, or a high school. They'd find it somewhere where they could go and set up a panel of people and talk about different aspects about firearms in Massachusetts. Most of them were people that were social workers, people that deal with uh, people in poor communities and in crappy towns. There was one panel of women that were domestic violence survivors, and one of the ladies actually said that the reason she knows about domestic violence is because she had an intimate partner that she lived with who was a prohibited person, and he got a gun illegally and threatened her and her kids with it. Um, there were a lot of people that were social workers, and they're like, hey, you know what, we work with these immigrants, we work with people that are have two different jobs, they can't keep control of their kids because they're working so much, and guns are an issue, guns are a problem because they live in they live in crappy towns where core crime is high. There were two times, there were 11 of these. I went to eight of them, and I wrote about the ones that I went to and posted some stories on news2a.com. And the two that I went to that I felt good about, it's not that I felt good about them, I just didn't feel as bad. One of them, they had somebody that was a police officer, somebody who was in the military for a long time, and he's on the board of directors with the Gun Owners Action League. They had someone that owned a gun store. His name was Toby Leary. He owns Cape Gun Works. And then they had a local police officer there. And I felt not horrible about that one because they had some pro gun guys that were up there. The second one I felt good about was when they were talking about, they had the director of education, John Green, from the Gun Owners Action League there, and they had somebody else who lost his son to a school shooting at a college campus back in, I think it was in the '90s at some point. So what I liked about the one with John Green is John Green was very masterful in combating what the lies and the untruths that this other gentleman proposed. So I ended up writing about all these, like I said, on News 2A. Michael, there were a lot of the red shirts showed up every time, and they're like, we want to have live fire, we should require live fire, because if I'm going to go into the shopping mall, I want to know that if you've got a gun that you can hit your target and that you're safe and that you know what you're doing and you're well trained and all this sort of stuff. So what happened is the last one was in early June, the last gun law listening tour, and it was one of these things. Honestly, the first couple ones they did, it was this. They're like, "Hey, we're going to do this gun law listening tour. We don't know when or where. Oh, it's tomorrow night on the Cape." Yeah, well, the Cape's a 2-hour drive for me, right?
Immediately just dropped out in the middle of nowhere. It's like,
It's the very last one that they did. They were doing two of them in western part of this in western Massachusetts. One of them, they were all at 6:30 in the evening, 6:30 to 8, and 6 to 8, 6:30 to 8:30, something like that, right? Um,
mhm.
the day of the second to last one, they're like, oh, the one we're doing tomorrow is going to be at 3:30 in the afternoon. What? Like, why change the time on this? This is baloney. So,
Yeah.
um, Rep Day, during this time of all of the gun law listening tours, Rep Day took a meeting with one Gabby Giffords, and she came by
Listen,
and
no more guns.
yes, she came by and visited him in his office. And I assume she had the structure of this 141-page bill that he was able to crank out less than 3 weeks after the gun law listening tours were done. And
Wow.
I assume it accompanied a big fat check from one Nanny Bloomberg. Is
Uh,
kind of what I'm assuming.
probably,
Right. It would be
probably.
safe to assume this. Yeah. He came up with new terms like an assault style firearm, which includes almost every semi-automatic rifle there is.
Funny, isn't it?
Yeah, like a Kel-Tec Sub 2000. It's a pistol caliber carbine that folds in
Right.
half. That is an assault style firearm, according to this new definition he had. So, in all of the besides the new definitions, there were some things they in Massachusetts. We have a firearms identification card and we have a license to carry.
Mhm.
Now, according to the Massachusetts laws, a firearm is a handgun. Okay.
Okay.
So the firearm identification card allows you to have non-large capacity rifles and shotguns.
Okay.
Yeah, so you cannot have a firearm with a firearm identification card. So one of the things that they
Sure,
did,
why not?
right? I say
Makes it
welcome to the Commonwealth.
clearly.
Exactly. So the one of the things they did was they changed the FID card to a long gun permit. So it's still non-large capacity rifles and shotguns. You can have a pump action, a bolt action, a lever action. You can have I think you can have a Ruger 1022. I'm not 100% sure, but anyway, so
Right.
he changed some definitions like that, but then everything else they included anything and everything that the anti-gun folks have talked about having. They wanted to have a written exam in order to get your license to carry. They wanted to have live fire training as part of your license to carry. With, are you ready for this? Some things that have been proposed were 50 rounds of ammunition in a 5-hour range session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
So I said to people, I said, so what do? You like, you shoot the 50 rounds and then you watch War and Peace for the next 4.5 hours?
right.
Like, I
50
don't,
rounds is about 20 minutes at the range for me.
yeah, if you slow down and it's deliberate fire.
Right. That's
Yeah,
if we're taking turns,
exactly.
you know.
Exactly.
It's like the people who freak out about, oh my god, he had 50 whole rounds. It's called a box of ammo.
Yeah, we call it a box of
It's
ammo.
not a big deal.
You can't buy them unless.
Yeah, unless it's like the jacketed hollow points that are illegal in
Right.
some states.
Yes, exactly. So
So
yeah, so they wanted live fire as part of the curriculum. They wanted to have you take de-escalation courses, and they wanted you to do some active shooter scenario training as well,
okay.
ju- just to get the license.
Yeah.
Just
Now,
to get the license.
don't get me wrong. I think de-escalation training is something everyone should do.
Oh, sure.
But I don't but I mean, mandating it just
As
anytime you mandate training, it's just how long until they make it more and more difficult. In fact, this is a prime example because this is making it more difficult to get a permit. You're ramping up
yeah.
the training requirement. And it's hilarious. Like when you start talking about the live fire and the argument, it's like, well, I want to make sure you can hit the target. Firing on a range and under stress in a gunfight type situation is completely different. It doesn't matter how good you are at the range.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So
It's not the same.
it's not the same. So it's all ridiculous. So yeah, so they wanted to do that. Then they wanted to they added including you could only carry in places that had a sign that said you could carry there.
Okay, so like New York State did
Yes.
after brewing.
Yes, exactly. New Jersey was trying to do the same sort of thing.
Right.
Um, so if there was no sign, you should assume that it's a gun-free zone and you cannot carry there. Yeah. They wanted to
But
make
if
it. Go ahead.
So the default is to just assume that you don't have rights in a given place instead of making someone make the actual statement. No, your gun rights are end at the door.
Right. And I mean, let's face it, over the last 3.5 years, we've discovered that when people that lean left don't get their way, they have mostly peaceful protests.
Yes,
Right.
fiery but peaceful.
Yes, fire, fire, exactly. So let's say you're a business and you said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to put a sign up and allow people to carry here." Well, now your place is possibly going to get trashed by the people
Mhm.
that are upset that you're allowing people to carry in your business, which is
Right.
completely ridiculous. They also wanted to do things, so they upped the training. So it's more difficult to get training. It's going to take more time. It's going to take more money.
Hmm.
Um, then they were going to change the curriculum. We have 28 classes, and I think it's a 26 or 28, 29 classes that are approved classes. None of them, by the way, are USCCA classes. Um,
Of course.
right. So there's a certain number of classes you can take that are approved courses. They were going to have one approved course by the state police, and the instructors that teach the class, once they figure out what the curriculum is and all that sort of stuff, the teachers can only teach that class. Then the state would issue the certificate. Then you know what they
Okay.
then you know what you do after you get the certificate? You go to the police station, set up your interview with the police, get fingerprinted, photographed, background checked. They send everything back to the state to make the license after the state sends you the certificate. I'm like, this is more paperwork. Now, in Massachusetts, the law says they have to process the applications within 40 days. Now, in some towns, like in the city of Worcester, which is in the central part of Massachusetts, it's I've talked to some people. It's 4 months to get the appointment to go in for your interview, and it's 4 months to get the permit afterwards.
So, and however long it takes for you to line up a class, you could be looking at a year
Oh my God, absolutely. I was
easily.
Absolutely. And I tell people, I said, listen, I'm going to go through all when I teach classes, I said, we're going to go through all this stuff. The book is there. It's a reference for when you actually buy a gun, because it's going to be 2 months and you're going to forget all this stuff. We do all this stuff in class. I'm not going to say it's not irrelevant, it's not important or anything like this. You're going to forget. You're
Yeah.
absolutely going to forget this stuff in 2 months, when you finally get your license and can buy something.
Hmm.
Um, so some other things it had were, it was going to make it nearly impossible. I'm not going to say nearly impossible, very difficult for FedEx and UPS to deliver firearms to gun stores, because they wanted to have all of the delivery trucks locked and secured, as if it was somebody that was transporting a firearm in their vehicle. So that means that gun stores wouldn't be able to get guns. So the guns that we have in Massachusetts are all that we're going to get. They wanted
Hmm.
to. Oh my gosh, I just they wanted to serial we have I'm gonna use Jedi mind tricks when I do this. We don't have gun registration. We have transfer registration in Massachusetts.
Which obviously is completely different.
Right. So it's if you let's say you broke a mirror and you had to move to Massachusetts. You can bring your Georgia guns up here, and you have to get a license to have them. They have to follow all of our assault weapon nonsense. But
So I can't bring my guns.
um, but
That's what you're telling me.
totally. So you would have to you'd have to get a license to possess the guns that you already have, but you don't have to let Massachusetts know that you have them. However, if you were going to move up here and get your license, you could sell one of your Georgia guns to me, and then we have to start a paper trail for that gun. We have to
Right.
register the transfer. So one of the things they wanted to do is they wanted to register all of the firearms, and they wanted to. This is the crazy part. They wanted to serialize magazines and register magazines.
Yeah, because
Right.
those aren't so plentiful as things currently stand.
Right, exactly. It's funny to talk to guys who are like, yeah, you talk to some people and they have boxes of magazines,
Oh yeah.
you know?
I remember a buddy of mine used to have like multiple totes of loaded AR mags.
Nice. That is preparedness right there.
Yeah, he had, I mean, literally a couple hundred loaded GI. GI mags, those things you can get for like $5, or you could back then.
Right.
And it was, he just had them all topped off with 223 or 5.5. I didn't actually examine the rounds to see which it was.
Right.
Actually, knowing him was probably 5.56, but
Nice.
I mean, he still had just dozens and dozens of magazines, and that's just all I saw. I
Right.
don't know what else he had
That's all you knew
because,
about.
right, magazines for a lot of firearms are relatively inexpensive,
Hmm.
and you know, it kind of sucks to have to. You're having a good day at the range. It gets annoying to have to reload magazines,
Sure.
even if
Absolutely.
you're not for looking at it from a preparedness standpoint. Is I can blow through 500 rounds on a range day if I've got the ammo and the time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And
It's
it's just
not
annoying to have to top off mags every 2 or
right.
3 magazines,
Yeah. It's ridiculous for sure.
and they're wanting to serialize them.
They want to serialize and register magazines.
Yeah, that's gonna work out. That's gonna
It's
work out
completely,
brilliant.
completely ridiculous. So
Mm,
this is the bulk of this. Oh, what else did it do? Um, it was going to require. We already have storage laws in Massachusetts, so guns have to be
mhm.
locked and secured, so unauthorized people don't have access to it. Um, but the storage, like if you had a lot of guns and you had a gun room that was a dedicated gun room where you keep all your guns, that is no longer acceptable. You would have to keep all of the guns locked up individually.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So, your big collectors.
Yeah, big collectors, guys that have gun rooms, and I know a couple people that have them. You go into their house, you
Yeah.
go into their basement. They got I know one guy that's got a key that goes in this way and a different key that goes in this way in the locks.
Mhm.
So it's a pain in the neck to get into there. And once you get in there, he's got guns on the walls, and that would not be legal anymore.
And even though you could literally build one of those like a bank vault,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
reinforced concrete, nobody's getting in there,
Hmm.
better secured than, a little cheapo
Oh my God.
sheet metal gun safe.
Right. I hate saying a stack on, but better than a stack on for sure.
Yeah. Uh, and it's ridiculous. Of course, then again, let's be honest. You mentioned the listening tour and who all was there. The vast majority of these people are not gun people. They're not people who understand firearms. They're people who see one see a negative aspect of firearms. You mentioned social workers.
Yeah.
They're in, they work in the worst neighborhoods. They see the crime, they see the gang violence. They see all of that. They don't see the single mom who fends off a rapist who broke into her house in the middle of the night. They don't see the the old guy who pulled a gun on a mugger and scared him off without ever firing a shot. They never see any of the 1.6 something million defensive gun uses that
Yeah.
we recently found in a survey. They don't
It's
see any of that.
it's like the Blues Brothers when they're at Bob's Country Bunker. They get a list and like these are requests. These mean nothing.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's play the old rhythm and blues tunes. We're not going to play any country tunes. Yeah, these are
right.
requests. They mean nothing. It's
Yeah,
there was one lady at one of the gun law listening tours. She was a social worker. She said that day is when she started to look up some of the gun laws. I'm like, how is she on a panel that has to talk about firearms when that day she's actually looking up some gun laws? And she said she's like, I was bowled over when I looked at the gun laws today and found out a 15-year-old can get an FID card and get a shotgun to go hunting and walk around the woods by themselves. And one of the things I said in response to her is, I didn't know hunting is a big thing that the immigrants are doing here in your town.
yeah, yeah, and it's hilarious. It's always, well, we're not coming after your hunting guns.
Right? We're not coming
Yeah,
after.
that makes it really clear that the idea of somebody going hunting, of a 15-year-old walking around the woods by themselves. Hey, at 15, I was in the woods with an infield jungle carbine hunting deer,
Yeah,
but
it's
I didn't shoot anybody.
right. I was a 15-year-old with a bicycle starting fires. So,
Oh, I did that too. Don't get me wrong.
right.
You know,
So
I, it's
it's I I mean, going back to their attitudes about guns, which is what you were talking about, they don't see them as self-defense uses. They don't see them as something for hunting or providing some food. They don't see them as sort of a competition, competition tools as well. They just see
Yeah,
them as, oh my gosh, bad people own guns and bad people with guns commit crimes.
right.
So
It,
yeah, this is one
it's the
way,
same
one
reason
regime.
I don't put too much stock in doctors talking about how, well, I'm in the emergency room and I see the results of gun violence. Well, okay, yeah, you do. And you
Right?
see
Like,
one side that doesn't give you encyclopedic knowledge of the entire topic.
hmm yeah, I mean, you're there fixing people that got shot. Now, why
Uh-huh.
did this person get shot, and who did they get shot by? Let's
And a
let's
lot of times they don't have that information.
right, they don't. But let's see. Somebody came into the hospital with a gunshot wound. Okay, let's find out what the story is. Well, this guy was trying to carjack somebody.
Mhm.
Okay, so this person's not necessarily a good person, but they are out committing crimes, and they ended up getting shot in
Or
the
or
process.
conversely, this is a gang member who was, targeted by a rival gang member,
Right?
because they were involved in a shooting last week.
Exactly.
And it's you yes, talking about the trauma is something that is a worthy topic of conversation, but, some people wanna make that the totality of discussion. It's like, "Well, I treat this, therefore I know more than you." Well, you do in some aspects. I mean, I was a Navy corpsman, so I know a little bit about how to treat trauma, but obviously a doctor knows far more than me in the treatment of a gunshot wound.
Sure.
I'm not gonna dispute that fact. But, I mean, like, people like you and me are into the gun culture. We study both, the good and the bad.
Mm.
And, we look at the bad because those people are the people we might have to come in contact with.
Yeah.
So we have to keep in mind where are the bad sections in town? Where do I not need to go in the middle of the night if I don't, so I
Oh,
don't
for
have to
sure.
pull a gun? All these things. We're a little more versed in the overall aspect. They see that one part and think it gives them expertise. In the same way, the social workers, that social worker felt completely entitled to be on that panel.
Oh my God, it was crazy. It was ridiculous. There's some there was another panel where the women that were up there were they've had children and family members that were involved in gang violence, um, and they lost their sons, their teenage sons, to gang violence and violence with a gun. Um, and I'm thinking, so you're going to stop me? I don't participate in that stuff, but you're going to stop me
Right.
from having a gun because your son made some bad choices?
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, it's like you could make the case that you want to disarm me because you failed as a parent.
right. Oh my God. It's not my fault you raised your kid to be a gang member. I'm doing my best to
Right.
keep my kids off the streets, and my daughter off the pole, and
Yeah.
keep them straight and narrow. And I got to tell you, there's so many times when I hear stories, I just send my kids a text message. I'm like, I'm very proud of you. You're a wonderful child. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Right. It's like my oldest, it's like you'll sit there and you'll get frustrated because he doesn't do what he needs to do around the house. As far as I know, he's still asleep when we record this at 10:30 in the morning, and will be for at least another 2 hours.
Right.
But
He
but
wakes
on the
up.
same token, he ain't never been brought home by the cops. His only contacts with the police are speeding tickets,
Right.
and only two of those in his entire 6 years of driving. You
That's a
know,
pretty good
I'm a
record.
winner.
Yeah.
I'm winning. In
ab-
that regard.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
yet, I like you say, a lot of these people who are like, well, we need to, restrict guns because my baby was killed, and then you look into it and it's your kid was involved in a believed to be responsible for a gang shooting 3 weeks before they were shot and killed.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah, do you remember seeing that video where the woman said, her son was shot or arrested or something, and she's like, "He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just shooting at the police."
yes.
Hello?
Like, I mean, I get not everyone likes police, but I think we should all be able to come together on the idea that shooting at them is a bad
It's
thing.
probably not a good idea. Yeah.
I mean, I was raised by a cop, so, I'm a little biased. When you shoot at the police, you could potentially have been shooting at my dad,
Yeah.
and in which case he was gonna shoot you back because he'd done that in Vietnam, so I know he didn't have a problem pulling the trigger.
Right.
I've got an
Right.
I've got an SKS that proves he can pull a trigger because he shot the Viet Cong that had it.
Wow.
You know, one of my favorite guns that will never that's a Pratt from my cold dead hands one.
Oh,
But
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, but, it's like, I was only shooting at the cops, he wasn't doing anything wrong.
Wasn't doing anything wrong.
Yeah, when you take your anti-police sentiment and can't recognize that generally this is shooting at anybody is bad,
Yes, for sure.
unless they're shooting at you first, and once they do, all bets are off,
All
you know
bets are off, man. Absolutely. Absolutely.
you know, but y'all are really dealing with something, and I find it funny because with the number 420 in it, I was hoping it was like pot legalization.
Right?
That would have
I
been perfect.
I
I'd have
told a
been
couple
like, "Well done, guys. Well done, Massachusetts."
I
But nope.
I tried telling a couple people, like, they called it 420 because, they were all stoned when they came up with this bill,
Okay, I'll allow it.
right? Like,
For my
"Hey, this
purposes,
is"
I'll take it.
right, "This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna make it impossible for people to own guns, and then if they do get them, we're gonna make it impossible for them to carry anywhere."
Yeah, and it's just bizarre to me. Then again, it's Massachusetts. It was on. I've always wondered if states have a competition for the strictest gun laws.
Right.
Like
It's
California's been the winner, and they keep pushing, make sure they don't lose that lead. But then
right.
now Massachusetts coming out of the blue, going, "No, no, we want that title back, baby."
Totally. And
And
then
it's
they
like Oregon. You remember a few years back, Oregon had a bill that was like, limit mag capacity to 5 shots. And I'm like, you realize that, like, if they can only have a 5 round capacity, that eliminates a lot of revolvers.
right. This
You
is
know,
true. Everyone's gotta have a J-frame.
yeah,
And
and it's
it's
like at that moment, it suddenly would have made them the most restrictive state in the country.
right. This the ridiculous thing with and I say this when I teach classes. I say, I'm not pro Glock as I am pro Smith and Wesson or pro Sig or pro Ruger or pro whatever. But get yourself a Glock. In states where we have magazine restrictions, and currently we can have high cap magazines if they were made before September 13th, 1994. So I always tell people, I'm like, buy yourself an old Glock, and then spend $125 on a high cap magazine because bad guys have friends.
Mhm.
And this is why you should have high cap magazines. When somebody breaks in your house, it's three guys. I saw some video. I don't know if it was within the last day or so where somebody was pulling into a gas station somewhere, and like three guys came out of nowhere and started walking towards the car. And then they pulled backwards. They went to exit, and then there was a guy standing at the corner of the building. He's got a gun out aiming towards the other guys. I'm like, dude, there are like three or four guys walking around this gas station.
Mhm.
Looked like they were either going to rob you or get into a gunfight themselves. I'm like, yeah, dude, don't go to that gas station.
Yeah,
Um, but bad guys have friends, which is why you want to have high cap magazines.
yeah. Well, it's funny because so many people are like, "Well, if you need more than 10 rounds, you need to work on your marksmanship." But look at police shootings sometimes. Look at the total number of rounds fired by supposedly highly trained law enforcement
Mm.
who are not as highly trained as a lot of people want to believe. I know how often cops shoot.
Yeah,
Uh,
once or twice a year, depending on how often they have to do the qualification. Yeah.
right, and unless they're gun people,
Oh, absolutely. I
and then they're doing it. No, then they're just gun people for that purpose. They're just shooting more often because they like it.
right.
Um,
I got a phone call from a guy 6 or 7 years ago, and started asking me questions, and then he finally came out and said, "I'm a police officer." In one of the cities in central Massachusetts, and I've been a cop for 15 years. I learned to shoot in the academy. I shoot once a year when I do my qualification. I'm on the SWAT team, and I didn't really do well. Can you treat me like a beginner and teach me how to shoot? Yeah, I
and
absolutely.
he was on the SWAT team.
Right. So we took his M&P full size 45 down to the range. I bought some dummy rounds, right? Some A zoom dummy rounds. And guess where he shoots? Low and left. Right.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
he paid for 2 hours of instruction time. 15 minutes into it, I'm like, "Yeah, dude, you're anticipating. You're pushing the gun down every time you press the trigger." He's like, "Are you sure?" "Yes, I
Oh,
am."
yeah. Yeah.
So I put in a couple dummy rounds, and we had bang, bang, click. There's the
Yeah.
problem, man.
My dad used to use his 38 with me because I was real bad about that back in the day,
Mhm.
and it would be like 2 rounds here and a round over here, spin it, close it.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's what,
Yes.
and it would, sure enough, click, and he's like, "That's what you're doing."
That's what the problem is, yeah. So this is kinda funny. So I told the guy about dry fire, and he's like, "I've never heard of this." "You've been a cop for 15 years, never heard of dry firing?" "Okay."
Yeah.
6 months later, I'm in a store, and this guy comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, are you Charlie Cook?" I'm like, "Yes."
Yeah.
Like,
That's always nerve-wracking.
"Who wants to know?" And he says, "I was the police officer that you took shooting a few months ago, and I've been doing dry firing, and it's working out great."
That
"Cool, man.
that's yeah, but a
This is
lot of
what
people
we
don't
do."
realize that the supposedly highly trained cops don't shoot as much as your average regular gun owner,
Oh my god, absolutely. It's
and
again, once or twice a year when they have to do qualifications.
yeah, but getting back to where what I was talking about is, the people are like, "Well, improve your marksmanship." You look at if you assume we fire as often as a cop, look at how often police officers miss in a gunfight.
Mm,
Despite their qualification standard, they miss a lot because gunfights are not a piece of paper at the end of a range.
right.
You're usually the guy you're shooting at has this annoying tendency to both move and shoot at you.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah, and
they don't play fair.
yeah, they don't. And I think Clint Eastwood said this in Heartbreak Ridge, that incoming fire has the right of way.
Yeah, someone once referred to a gunfight as a two-way range,
Mm, I
and
like.
I think it's probably the most accurate description because in a way that's really what's going on.
Yeah.
And they're dynamic. You know, you get into you're at the range. You're trying to qualify. Uh, if you're someone who shoots regularly, you're perfectly calm, even for a qualification shoot. You're fine. Someone starts shooting at you, the adrenaline kicks in, and your hands are like this.
Yeah.
I had actually had that happen at a competition one time, and I kept telling everyone, "No, I'm fine. It's my gun." They got scared. Um, which everyone got. But it's funny. As bad as that was, I still beat most of the cops that were in the field.
Shocking.
You know,
I've
and these were gun people.
Yeah.
These were gun cops, not just your regular street cop in most cases.
Mm,
Now there was a couple of notable exceptions that just stomped the dirt in me. I was middle of the pack,
right.
you know, but a lot of the cops that took part were below me,
Mm,
and I
yeah.
had just gotten my gun like 6 months earlier, so I didn't have I bought my first handgun. This was a handgun competition. My
Yeah.
first handgun about 6 months earlier, and had not spent a lot of time at the range with it,
Mm,
and I was out shooting them. But, and I'm not saying this to brag because I wasn't shooting well.
right. But you were
Um,
shooting better than some of the police. It's
right.
I mean, I remember when I first became a gun guy and started to get into it, I had friends that are like, "Oh, dude, you like shooting? Why don't you become a cop?" I don't want to deal with all the other stuff that goes along with being a cop.
Mhm.
Like, I like shooting. I don't want to do patrols. I don't want to do paperwork. I don't want to have to deal with you know people that are drunk and annoying and dealing with that aspect of it. I don't want to pull people over and give them speeding tickets. You know what I like to do? I like to shoot. I don't like all the other stuff.
My
So,
dad my late father had 30 years of law enforcement experience.
God bless him.
He, uh, never fired his gun in the line of duty except for range qualification.
Mhm.
It was all the other stuff. He was in a lot more fist fights than gunfights.
Sure.
And and of course, my dad, his nickname was Barney because when he first joined the department, he looked like Barney Fife. So you can imagine how fist fights worked out for him. Uh,
Right.
yeah,
Not well.
no, it's so if you don't want to get into a fist fight, why would you want to be a cop?
Yeah,
You
I
know,
yeah, I remember, being in back in my youth playing in nightclubs and stuff. You see the cops outside dealing with a bunch of drunk people, and the cops got these gloves on. They're like, "Move, move, move, get out of here!" Nobody starts moving. The guy grabs somebody by the neck and starts pushing them around and stuff. I'm like, I don't want to do that, man. I like to shoot. So,
Yeah,
co-
it's completely there's overlap in the activity. Cops
Mhm.
shoot to some degree, you know, shooters shoot, therefore there's overlap in the Venn diagram. But that's where it ends.
Oh, sure.
I just I hell, my dad basically forbade me becoming a cop. He's like, "Do literally anything else with your life."
Right. Be a fireman. Make some chili.
Yeah. Actually, when I got out of the Navy, I considered being a firefighter, and he was totally cool with that,
Right.
you know, which is
Well,
funny because, they see more danger on a daily basis.
sure. But people are happy to see firemen, but they're not happy to see police officers.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, then again, Dad, we're getting completely off the Second Amendment topic, but I got to share this story. My dad pulled over a woman one time, and she's just basically cussing him up a storm the whole time he's writing the ticket. Gives her the ticket. 30 minutes later, he gets a call, return home to, you know, breaking and entering. Someone broke into a house.
Hmm.
He pulls up. This same woman comes out. Oh my God, thank you so much for coming so quickly. It's to him, it was always like the perfect example of the dichotomy of being a cop.
Yeah,
You're
absolutely.
scum when you're horrible when you're holding someone accountable, but when you're responding, they love you
Yeah.
most of the time. He also had one who he pulled up to a breaking and entering, and the woman comes out in the front yard. It's like, oh no, no, you can't park here. You have to park around back. He goes, okay, gets in his car, goes back on patrol.
There you
He got
go.
some days off. He got some days off for that one though, but it was also one of those cases every other officer is sitting here going,
Right. You're,
he
you're
just
gonna
did what they all wanted to.
you're gonna tell me I can't park here. I guess you
Yeah.
don't need my help.
I have a bit of a bit of snark. My dad is where I got it from.
Nice.
You know.
It doesn't skip a generation.
Yeah. No, it really doesn't. My mom was a smart ass too, and so I worked a job with someone who had been a police officer with my dad, had come over to our house, so he knew my mom.
Hmm.
One of my coworkers like, "Tom, have you ever tried not being a smart aleck?" And my buddy, this guy was like, he didn't have a choice. You don't understand. This is defense mechanism. He never had a
Right.
shot.
These are in the
Uh,
genes, man.
right, exactly. So, let's talk about some of the other things you do because
Well, so I want, let me
oh,
finish up a
yeah,
little bit with the bill. So,
yeah, let's do that.
one of the good things that happened is this bill has rallied the gun owners in Massachusetts, even the closet gun owners that we have here, to write to their politicians and email them and tell them that this is a bunch of baloney and this should not pass. What ended up happening is the Speaker of the House decided to pull it back, to take it off as a bill, and to revamp it when they get back together in the fall, which will be in the next couple weeks, to revisit it and see if there's any changes they can make. Um, and it's honestly it's really it's great. There's a company that came out, obviously the local printmaker came out and came up with these signs that says, support the Second Amendment, stop HD 4420, call your politicians, all this sort of stuff. And this guy's been cranking through yard signs, and I'm telling you, I drive all the time, and I see the signs in every town that I go to. And there's part of me that wants to go over and put in one of my writing shotgun postcards on their door, so that they they tune into the show, because I'm like, well, this is a friendly person, right? This is somebody that's
Yeah,
on our side. And I've even seen some people online that are non-gun folks, that have said this is too far, and even some of the anti-gun folks are like, yeah, we don't want people to have guns, but all of this is ridiculous. So the good news is that it's been stalled. They're going to look at it when they get back together in the next couple of weeks. So we'll see what happens. Maybe the bill will change, different change numbers, and who knows what's going to happen. But
well, let's hope that they just realize this is kind of
it's
ridiculous.
it's all infringement,
All of
all
it,
of
all of
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an issue with things like de-escalation training. I don't have an issue with you know range time. Obviously,
Hmm.
it's but when you start mandating it, well, it's like it started off one way, and they're going to keep adding to it until at some point you basically have to be a freaking Green Beret, you know,
Right, and
Navy
then
SEAL
right,
to have a gun.
they want you to be John Wick, but then they're not gonna let you carry anywhere.
Right.
What's the sense here? Why am I going through all of this if I can't carry anywhere? You said something a while ago on, I can't remember if it was on the Daily Bullet or if it was on Polite Society podcast, but you said something where you said when people, when there's the state mandated training, people take that and that's all they take because they
Mhm.
think the state's telling you, hey, this is what you need in order to get a gun
Yep.
license. This is the minimum. And the minimum ends up being the maximum training that they take. But when
Mhm.
there's permitless carry or constitutional carry, people end up seeking more training because they learn there's a lot more to it.
Right. And it's one of those when you tell somebody, well, this is what you've got to have. They just go through they're going through the motions.
Oh, absolutely.
And like you say, you mentioned, after a couple of months, it's gone. In a lot of cases, they walk into the mandated training, they do the requirements, they take the test, they go to the range, they do that, and then they're like, okay, I'm done. It's out of my head.
Yeah.
When you voluntarily walk into a training session for your own education, you pay attention, you try to internalize that stuff, you make it part of you, you take notes because you want this knowledge. When you tell me I have to have knowledge, I mean, think about it. Okay, you went to college. The classes that were part of your major, you probably spent a lot more time internalizing that
Oh,
those lessons than the core curriculum class.
absolutely.
You spent you're a musician. You probably spent more attention to music
So
than algebra.
you ready for this? I went to music school. I had an English class my first year. Um, I had a history of jazz class, and that was
Okay.
it. That was it.
Really?
That was it. There was no math, there was no science. It was
Oh,
all
you lucky.
I know, it was all learn how to play this instrument. I
Well,
went as a music teacher, so it's 2 years of piano lessons and a year of voice lessons and learn, a semester of playing the trumpet, a semester of playing
yeah.
the clarinet and learn how to arrange, music theory and all that sort of
Okay.
stuff.
All right. Well, in high school, you had some of
Yeah,
those other classes in high school. You did what you could to pass the test.
and that was it. That was it. And then
Right.
in and out, absolutely.
So I mean, that's something else. When you mandate the training, it doesn't do as much as people think because they're just going through the motions.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I really that really hit me. I'm like, yeah, that really makes sense.
right. So you mentioned the writing shotgun with Charlie uh, cards. So that's a good segue to bring you up. Writing shotgun with Charlie. That's your channel.
Hmm.
Tell folks what you do there.
All right,
I know
so
this, but they don't.
right, so writing shotgun is it's an idea that I stole from watching Carpool Karaoke. I, being a musician, I wanted to be a rock star, but being a fat kid that played the trombone, we don't get to be rock stars.
No.
No, so I've been a band teacher for since the 1900s, and after I became a gun guy, be gun instructor, and podcasting started to become a thing, YouTube started to become a thing. I decided I would watch Carpool Karaoke, and I would see James Corden driving around with rock stars and interviewing them and singing and having a great time. And I'd see a little bit of comedians in cars getting coffee, and Seinfeld's hanging out with Norm Macdonald and Chris Rock and Eddie Murphy and having a great time. So I'm like,
Yeah.
how can I do this with gun people? How can I do this as a gun guy? And I figured I could interview people in the car, and I would call it writing shotgun. And writingshotgun.com was taken. Can't remember who owns it, but writing shotgun was not available. So my mentor would say, you have to interject your personality into things. So I said, great, I'm going to call it writing shotgun with Charlie because I couldn't come up with another name.
Yeah.
And then
It works.
yeah, and then I started interviewing people. Just test running, and I interviewed a couple musicians I played with, interviewed some local people, interviewed some local gun instructors, and then I reached out to Ken Blanchard, the black man with a gun, and he agreed to be on the show. And then I reached out to Anthony Calandro from Gun for Hire, and he agreed to be on the show. And I'm like, now I'm on to something. This is pretty cool.
Mhm.
I ended up reaching out to one of my friend from a previous life, um, her she moved to Minneapolis, and her husband is his name is Lee Michaels, and he was a Christian conservative talk show host in Minneapolis, and so he ended up being robbed at gunpoint. And his story ended up in the book called Lessons from Unarmed America by Rob Pincus and Mark Walters.
Yep.
So I reached out to Ashton. Ashton said, "Hey, my husband's a gun guy. I found out that this happened to him, and I said I want to come out and interview him. And I'm, planned a weekend to go to Minneapolis." And Lee said, "Hey, if you come up this particular weekend, it's the Minnesota State Fair. You could interview Mark Walters." And I'm like, "Ooh, he's got a radio show. That's big time." So I went out to Minneapolis. I interviewed Mark. He had me on his radio show that night, which was really cool. Called me the next day, and he's like, "Hey man, this was really interesting. This was really fun. Nobody's doing anything like this. I want to help you out." And I'm like, "I don't really know what that means, but I will accept all the help I can get."
Right.
And he called me 2 days later, and he's like, "Do you want to speak at the Gun Rights Policy Conference and be on the panel of people that use new media to promote gun rights?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And that's how I got in and started meeting everybody, and meeting more people, and bringing my cameras. I go to Gun Rights Policy Conference, and I bring my cameras and I film a show. And yeah, I'd go to SHOT Show and film some shows in Vegas, and then reach out to more people, and just expanding my circle of friends so that I can go to Ohio, or I can go to Detroit, or I can go to Tennessee and be like, "Hey, this is who I am. I've had these people on the show." They're like, "Oh, I know who that guy is. I'll be on your show."
Yeah.
So it's been really it's absolutely amazing and fantastic.
Yeah. I know we met down in Florida at a gun rights.
Yeah, the Florida Carry event a
Yeah,
couple years ago.
Florida
Yeah.
Carrier. And you did how many episodes down there? Like, holy crap.
5.
Yeah.
I did 5.
Uh,
Two of the episodes, um, I had this little rental car, and I mean a
yeah.
little rental car. So we put me and John Petrolino in the passenger seat. I was driving, obviously Petrolino was in the passenger seat. In the back seat, we put Danny and Cheryl Todd from Gun Freedom
Yeah.
Radio. We put
Yep.
Patrick Collins from the Gun Food, and then we put Amy Dillon.
Yes.
She laid across everybody's lap in the back seat.
Yeah. I joked that, it was, basically you had rented a clown car.
Oh, absolutely.
With as many people as coming out. It's like people just kept coming out. I'm watching this, and I'm like, "It's hilarious."
It
But,
was
that's
great.
when I first learned about the show, and it was like, you'd mentioned, writing, comedians in cars getting coffee, and I'm like, "That's just brilliant."
I um I hate to admit this publicly, but I'm afraid that somebody with a cooler personality and more money is going to come along and just take the idea and run with it.
Well, a cooler personality is probably gonna happen, but, you started it. You were just there first, so, yeah,
Right.
that's
So
how
I
that
mean, the good news is if somebody does this, they're going to be like, "Hey, that guy stole Charlie's idea."
exactly, exactly. But the thing is, like, if somebody did this on the West Coast, for example,
Mhm.
because you're kinda because by nature what you're doing, it's a little harder to get out to
It's
the West Coast.
it is difficult. It's I have I'm going to say, a lot of people do shows on like this, a lot podcasts and whatnot. Well,
Yeah.
it's I went out to Colorado to go to a wedding over the summer, and I was going to be tied up for a day and a half doing wedding stuff. So I filmed a show when I landed in Denver. I did the wedding for a day and a half, and then I went and interviewed somebody. I did 6 shows in the Denver area in the course of a week.
Yeah.
So it's right. It's feast or famine. It's like, let's see, I don't have any shows in the month of May, but in June, I'm going here and I'm going here. In July, what did I do in July? In July, I went down to Virginia and I interviewed Phil Schreier from the NRA Museum. And then I ended up going to Colorado the week after that and knocking out 6 shows. So,
I know you also did one with this weird bearded guy named Cam Edwards
oh my,
that I'm that I'm familiar with a little
yes,
bit.
yeah, it was. Cam was one of these people. You're like, there's no way Cam would ever get on the show. And then, um, I reached out to him a couple times, and we were never able to make anything happen. So, eventually. John Petrolina would write about me and enough in his articles that Cam started to know who I was, and so I reached out to Cam and said, "Hey, I'm coming down to Virginia for something. Would you be up for filming a show?" And he's like, "Sure, let's do it." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh my god, this is crazy."
Well, it's like it's funny because I had seen Cam on NRA TV,
Hmm.
you know, Cam and Company. I was like, oh man, that was like the peak of the 2A career. And then, after NRA TV shut down, I get an email from Jonathan Garthright, who's in charge of all the Salem media websites.
Hmm.
At the time, I was pretty much the only contributor to Bearing Arms. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm in talks with somebody about being an editor." And I'm like, "Oh boy, what am I going to end up with?" And then
Right?
a couple days later, I get get two emails, one from Jonathan saying, yeah, so we've decided to hire Cam Edwards." And I'm like, "Dude."
No
And the other email was from
way.
Cam going, "Hey Tom, great to meet you." And I'm like, "This is surreal,"
It's
and now I'm talking to Cam like daily.
right. It's it's some of this stuff is completely. I hate to say that I appreciate all of it, but some of it's completely surreal. When I got to one of the cool ones I got to interview was Hickok 45, and
Yeah,
I reached out
yes.
yeah, I reached out to him in 2020 and said, "Hey, I'm coming down south to film some shows," and he's like, "Well, I'm going to be out of town." I'm like, "Okay, well, maybe we'll do this again." And then my daughter wanted to go visit a college in Nashville, so I'm like, "Hey, you want to? Can we try this again?" He's like, "Yeah, sure. Where do you want to meet?" I'm like, "At the Cracker Barrel?" Like, like
Well,
so right. So it's anywhere. So we picked a Cracker Barrel. We went out for breakfast. I had him on the show. The weekend that we went down to Nashville, it snowed and everything was like everything was frozen. It was almost impossible to get around. They don't have any snow plows down there.
yeah,
The the girl that was working at the hotel said she's like, "Yeah, I'm going to be stuck here for 3 days." I'm like, "Why?" "It's 2 inches of snow." And she's like, "Well, we can't drive in this. There's no snow
yeah.
plow."
You have to where you're from. 2 inches of snow is nothing.
It's a
Down
dusting.
here in the deep south, down here in the south. It's Armageddon.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
we get an inch of snow here in South Georgia, and people are freaking out.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
The fact that I'm military is a part of the reason I'm one of the few who can actually drive in snow.
Mm. I believe it.
You know,
Yeah. So
and
it's oh,
I
sorry.
was in Virginia, so it wasn't like I got a lot of snow,
Right.
but I can handle some. Most people here can't handle any.
Oh god, no. God, no.
Well, we get snow about once a decade, whether we need it or not.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's started. There's been a couple times it started at Halloween here. So
yeah, we'll get once if we're lucky.
yeah. Yeah, that's enough. That's all right though.
Yeah,
So it gets surreal when you go up to people and this was a cool one when I went to Colorado. Um, I had a couple people lined up to film some shows with, and I put something on my Facebook page that I was going to be going to Colorado, and then Michael Bain reaches out. He's like, "Hey, when are you going to be around, and what's your schedule like?"
nice.
And I'm like, I have to get Michael
What
Bain on the show, right?
your your schedule? My schedule is whatever works with your schedule.
Right, like this is my window. This is
Yeah,
this is when I have to leave. And so, there's been a lot of really cool opportunities. I got to go to Michael Bain's secret hidden bunker. Um,
nice.
and this is a place where people don't get to go, you know? And he invited me in and had a cup of coffee and hung out and talked with him and his sweetie for a couple hours. And then to get to the point where she's like, "Don't you guys have a show to film? Like, go get out of the house, leave."
Yeah,
What?
that's how it goes.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, it was wonderful.
yeah, but that riding shotgun with Charlie isn't the only thing you do on YouTube.
This
You
is
also do
true.
something called gun grams. What are
So,
those?
so gungrams were this idea before writing shotgun. I was talking with some buddies, over a couple drinks, and a friend of mine said, "It'd be really funny is if you put your passion for music and your passion for guns together." And he says, "What if you played bum ba da da da?" And I'm like, "That is completely ridiculous. Seems totally unsafe." but I'm going to work on my one-handed reloading and see what I can do. So it was
Yeah.
actually 9 years ago in 2014 is when my buddy suggested this, and I made a video, put the camera on the side of me, and it played the Blue Danube. I put it as like the Blue Danube trumpet Glock duet, and put it on YouTube, and that was cool, and nothing happened. And then a year later, it was one of my friend's son's birthday, and I said, you know what? I wasn't able to go to the birthday party, so I'm like, I'm gonna go down to the range, and I'm gonna play Happy Birthday, and I'm gonna shoot the cha cha chas that kids sing. But I used my AR, and from there, it took off. I had people that said, "Hey, can you do one for my birthday? Can you do Indiana Jones? Can you do Star Wars? Can you do, you know, ba 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 ba? Can you do the Adams Family?"
Yes.
And it took off, which was really cool. It was on this TV show called Right This Minute, which was on CBS, and they emailed me and said, can we use one of your videos? I'm like, dude, you can use three of my videos.
Yeah.
Right? And then
Nice.
yeah, then I get a phone call from this guy in Florida, and he's like, "Hey, I saw you on Right This Minute. Do you want to be on my radio show in Jacksonville?" Yes, I do. And then I get a call from a place in Chicago. Hey, we saw the video that you did. The Blackhawks play this song called Chelsea Dagger. It's do 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 do. So I borrowed a Blackhawks jersey from a friend of mine, and played that. And I get a phone call from a radio station in Chicago. Hey, we saw that. You want to be on the radio? Yes, I do. And I get a call from El Paso and whatnot. So those just took off, which are really cool. And then I started charging people for them, and taking requests, and I've got about 300 videos that have been watched on every continent except Antarctica.
Yep. I remember when you were getting a lot of attention in France,
Yeah, right.
which was hilarious to me because it's not like the French have a gun culture to speak of.
Yeah, somebody wanted me to do the French national anthem. I'm like, I should do it with water gun.
Yes.
Like
That would be
that
hilarious.
that would have been funny. I thought about doing this. I didn't have enough guns to do this, but I thought about doing Baby Shark. Um,
Oh,
and but starting with like a 22, right, for the
and then
Baby
as it
Shark,
goes,
and then Mama Shark,
Mama
and then
Shark,
I'm like, if I could get a grand for Grandpa Shark, like that, that would have been
that would
awesome.
be amazing.
I'm like,
Yes,
I don't have enough guns for this. But that would be really cool.
that would be great, especially a couple years ago when that song was so huge.
Oh yeah, it would have been really cool. Like hop on that wave, the Baby Shark wave. That would have been really cool.
That would have been great. Unfortunately, like you said, that takes a lot of guns.
It takes a lot of guns. Yeah, I used to just do everything in one take. I've started expanding a little bit and adding some B-roll video, and whatnot. So it's a little bit more of
Okay.
a minute and a half long film.
So it's
You
a
know,
production
right.
productive
So
production
I
value.
got some video of me loading magazines and open up the gun case, and I did a video
Gotcha.
for a company in California as they won this at a gun prom that the San Diego County Gun Owners was putting on, and they wanted to know if they could auction off a gun. I'm like, yeah, sure. So this guy sent me a bunch of pictures of him teaching classes, and I made a little commercial out of it. That's, I don't know, a minute and 20 seconds long or something.
Cool.
Yeah.
I get a kick out of the gun grams every time you post one. It tickles me to no end. I am easily amused though, so that doesn't mean a
It's
lot by
right.
itself.
Right.
But I mean, if you're a gun person, you know, because I've seen other people, they'll do like use steel targets with different pitches and use it
Yeah.
to supposedly play music, but that's still just shooting, and it's just kind of clever shooting.
Right.
But you're mixing the two in a way that
It's
I think is more challenging.
it is more challenging because your left hand's doing one thing, your right hand's doing something else. I'm sure you've seen the videos of the gun drummer. Um,
Mhm.
and he bangs on the drums and plays the drums to some heavy metal tune, and then he throws the drumsticks up and picks up ARs, a couple of ARs with some 50 round drum mags, and just plays in rhythm. And I'm like, anybody should be able to do that if you've got a sense of time.
So in
But
other words, I can't do it.
right there's some people that don't have a sense of time.
I have no
Um,
rhythm.
yeah, so that could be a problem. Um, but then he gets a ton more, since he's using ARs. He gets a ton more, ton more views and all that sort of stuff. So I'm like, all right, I'm not bitter or anything.
Yeah, I So I noticed. So
You
I
can tell.
noticed.
You can tell, right?
Right, right. It's completely, you know. But you know, we're going to probably wrap this up because we've hit a lot of stuff and we're coming up at an hour.
Mhm.
So tell people where all they can find you.
So the gun grams, you can find those on YouTube if you just search gun gram or Charlie's gun gram. I have a shooting instruction business, and I can't remember if it's Charlie's Gungrams or what the YouTube channel is called, or if it's personal shooting instruction. But if you just look for GUNGRAM, you'll find 300 of these videos. Riding Shotgun, you can find Riding Shotgun with Charlie on YouTube. You can find it in podcast form as well. The show also comes out on. Often it comes out on AmmoLand. I put it on Gunstreamer, and it's on the Ops Lens app as well. So, yeah, I'm trying to get the Stagecoach across America. So if people like the channel, please subscribe and like and share it, and all those good things that help the YouTube algorithms.
Yeah, at some point you got to get the stagecoach down to South Georgia.
Yes,
Just
absolutely.
just saying.
The uh, the goal is to go to all the states, and I've been to 34 states so far. So
That's pretty good. And if you
not
can drive to Hawaii, more power to you.
maybe not now.
Now, probably not now.
Probably not now.
Uh,
Maybe when things get cleaned up a little bit, I could
yeah,
fly out there and make a trip of it.
yeah. Not. I mean, and there's a lot. There are people don't. A lot of people don't realize that there is a gun culture in Hawaii.
Mm,
Uh, there are gun rights activists there. They're just. It's like any other blue state in that regard.
yeah.
So with that, we are gonna. Gonna. Charlie, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Okay, so now that I've clicked the right thing so I could wrap up here, I want to thank everyone for joining me. Thanks again to Charlie for joining me, and I will see you all next week.